It's almost unbelievable that we are less than 1 month away from the community name for the upcoming Yu-Gi-Oh! Rule change, Master Rule 5. This is going to be a big deal because right now, if you want to summon monsters from the extra deck, you need to either summon them to the extra monster zone or summon them to where link arrows point. But under Master Rule 5, fusion monsters, Xyz monsters, and synchro monsters no longer are restricted by the extra monster zone or link arrows just in general. Pendulum monsters and link monsters still will have to follow the old rules, which is probably for the best just to keep them from being too crazy. But if you're someone that played an Xyz deck or a synchro deck or a fusion strategy before link monsters came out, this is a huge deal for you because now your old deck is sort of back at full power. Now I'm not sure if every single older strategy that was killed by link summoning will suddenly be amazing, but a lot of people are very excited for it, myself included. In today's video I want to talk about 5 cards that I feel you need to buy or need to own before Master Rule 5 goes into effect. These cards are really strong, and I've talked about a couple of them in the past, but I want to put all of them in one video. If you guys do not have any of these cards and you want to purchase them, please use my link in the description below to tcgplayer.com. As I've said in the past and many times before, a portion of the sales that happen after clicking that link go right back into this channel. First up, we have Super Polymerization. Now right now this card is actually seeing a lot of play in the Invoked Should All strategy, and certainly it will still see play in that deck, but once Master Rule 5 comes around, the card gets even better because while Super Poly doesn't have that many downsides, I mean it can't be responded to, which is insanely powerful, and you can take out entire fields at once, it does have one major downside right now at least, and for the next couple weeks, that it does restrict your extra monster zone. Sure, you can summon a link monster first and then use a Super Poly, but in most cases you want to use it as the first card activated, which means whatever fusion monster you summon from your extra deck is going to be stuck up there. Now you can use Gravity Controller to remove it, but in a lot of cases you don't really want to do that. You'd rather just have the extra monster zone for other cards. Once Master Rule 5 goes into effect though, it's going to change because now you don't have to summon that fusion monster to the extra monster zone, you can just summon it to the main monster zone where it's not in any card's way. This is a pretty big deal, and there's a lot of cards right now that are great to summon off of this thing. The Earth Golem Adagnister is really strong, the World Chalice Guard Dragon is really strong, there's a lot of great cards. Even the old favorites of Starving Venom Fusion Dragon and the Predoplant Dragostopelia are still really solid. Super Polymerization right now is already really popular, but it's only going to get more popular with Master Rule 5, so if you don't have your playset yet, now is a perfect time to pick some up before the new Master Rule goes into effect. Speaking of fusion monsters, when Master Rule 5 was first announced, one of my favorite cards that I was thinking about was Millennium Restrict. If you don't have this card yet, you might want to look into it because this card is about to get a whole lot better. Millennium Restrict is a card that you can summon for free basically off of Instant Fusion, and it's already seen play in a lot of places. Right now, if you summon this card, you will have to turn it into either a Link Creebo or a Gravity Controller, but once Master Rule 5 hits, you don't have to do that. What does this thing do? Well, it says once per turn when your opponent activates a monster effect, as a quick effect, you can target one effect monster your opponent controls or is in their graveyard, equip that target to this card you control. This card gains attack and defense equal to that equipped monsters, which is okay, I guess, but more importantly, monsters with that equipped monster's name cannot attack. Also, their effects on the field and their activated effects are negated. So what is this card good against? Well, it's really effective against hand traps because you can steal them when your opponent discards them for cost, and then their effects do not resolve. Right now, like I said, this is already being played, but what makes this card even better is that no longer do you have to do it as the first play and then do a couple plays and then eventually get rid of it for a Gravity Controller, at which point your opponent can then just hand trap you anyway. Now you can just summon this thing, leave it up for the entire turn basically, and if your opponent at any point has a hand trap, well, you can just negate it by stealing it with this card. Generally speaking, I feel like Instant Fusion is just going to get a lot better, so if you don't have that card already, you probably should pick it up, but I do feel if you are playing Instant Fusion in Master Rule 5 format, you're going to want to play Millennium Restrict specifically because it's one of the best cards you can summon. At the moment, I feel like Dimensional Barrier is a super underrated tech option that more people should be playing. It's an excellent card against Lunalights and Shaddolls and any Fusion, Synchro, or Xyz strategy, but I think once Master Rule 5 hits in a few weeks, this card might go to staple status once again. This is a normal trap card that says, declare one monster card type, either Ritual, Fusion, Synchro, Xyz, or Pendulum. For the rest of this turn, neither player can special summon monsters of the declared type, also negate the effects of all monsters of that type while they're on the field, and then of course this is a hard once per turn ability. While I do not know what the next ban list will look like or what the format itself will look like, I think it goes without saying that once Master Rule 5 goes into effect, effect, especially for the first month, and especially at regional qualifiers and local tournaments. There's going to be a lot of players picking up their old favorite strategies that use synchros and exceeds and fusion monsters, trying to play them once again. Dimensional Barrier is a great counter to almost any deck playing those cards, especially if people go away from using so many link monsters in their extra deck. This card might just lock down a lot of random rogue strategies that you're not prepared for at a tournament. I've said this before, but anytime that the format is really diverse with a lot of rogue strategies that are all seeing success, it's important to have cards in your main and side deck especially that can be a lot of different strategies. You can't necessarily play a 12 card side deck that's only good against spirals and save the last 3 slots for random cards. You want to be playing things that are good in a lot of other matchups, so Dimensional Barrier definitely is going to be that card if it isn't already right now. Dimensional Barrier is definitely a card that has seen a ton of play in the past, and like I said, right now it's being teched in a few strategies, but this is going to be one of, if not the best trap cards going first against random strategies once Master Rule 5 goes into effect on April 1st. Next up we have Nibiru. Now I know all of you are probably already familiar with this card, but I feel with Master Rule 5 happening very soon, this thing's just going to get even better. We really just don't know what people are going to be playing. In a few weeks here before Master Rule 5, we have the Needle Fiber card coming out, or whatever the new name is, and this card is likely going to be good against any deck playing Needle Fiber, which is a big deal because that card is super hyped. There's a lot of really crazy combo link monsters coming out in Dual Overload, which is kind of scary, but Nibiru is likely going to be a great counter to all those strategies, especially not only those link monsters that are coming out in combo decks, but also just players going back to their old favorite Exceed spam or Synchro spam or Fusion spam decks. Nibiru is likely going to be a really safe choice even for the main deck in the coming months. Not every single deck that people are going to try out under Master Rule 5 is necessarily going to be a combo strategy, but a lot of them are going to summon at least 5 times in one turn, in which case Nibiru is a complete blowout. Nibiru is not the perfect hand trap for every single matchup, but just like in the case of Dimensional Barrier, it's good enough against most of the expected decks that you're going to play against that it is definitely worth having, at least in your side deck and perhaps the main deck depending on which strategy you're using. Before we talk about my last choice for today's video, I want to give an honorable mention to Waking the Dragon. I think I've mentioned this card in the past, but it's going to be a little bit better under Master Rule 5. When Waking the Dragon is destroyed or banished by an opponent's card's effect, you get to special summon any monster from your extra deck or main deck, which is really strong in a lot of back row strategies. Just like in the case of Instant Fusion and Super Polymerization, Waking the Dragon gets better under Master Rule 5 because you don't have to summon the monster to the extra monster zone if you're bringing out a very powerful fusion like Naturia Exterio. This doesn't matter that much because I feel like the decks that usually play Waking the Dragon are back row decks already that don't really care about their extra monster zone, but it is a small boost, and with people playing Lightning Storm in pretty much every single side deck, and with Master Rule 5 on the horizon, this card, which already seen a little bit of play, will likely be a lot more popular once Master Rule 5 goes into effect. Next up, we have another 2019 Yu-Gi-Oh! Megaton card, Dark Ruler No More. You want to play this card against similar matchups that Nibiru would also be good against, but in some decks it's easier to use this card instead of Nibiru. Nibiru is better in decks that really don't have a way to break boards because it just wipes the entire field. Dark Ruler No More, though, has a huge advantage over Nibiru, and that's that you don't actually have to draw it while your opponent is doing their combo. You can draw it at any point because it's a spell card, not a hand trap. So this thing says, negate the effects of all face-up monsters your opponent currently controls until the end of this turn. Also, for the rest of this turn, after this card resolves, your opponent takes no damage. Neither player can activate monster effects in response to this card's activation. So Nibiru sometimes doesn't resolve. If your opponent summons an Appaloosa, for example, you really can't Nibiru them unless you have another card to chain to it, so Dark Ruler No More can be really advantageous against decks that you know are just going to end on a whole bunch of monsters. Of course, the downside of Dark Ruler No More is that you actually have to be able to break your opponent's board. Sure, you can't OTK them because you can't inflict any damage the turn you use this card, but in general, a lot of the decks that are playing this thing don't really care about that so much. If you can pick your opponent's board apart piece by piece without them using any monster effects because you've Dark Ruler No More them, a lot of times they just can't recover, and hopefully you can set up your own board in the process. You'll have to analyze your own deck strategy to figure out whether or not Dark Ruler No More or Nibiru, or perhaps both, are the right choices for you, but these are just two really important options to have going forward, especially under Master Rule 5. Keep in mind for today's video, I wanted to go with really safe choices. The main reason I did this is because it's really hard to predict predict what's going to happen once Master Rule 5 actually goes into effect. Everyone's going to be trying out new strategies, and dual overload is going to change a lot as well with all those crazy link monsters and reprints and stuff like that. It's really hard to predict what the format is going to look like 1 month from now. The format right now over the past couple weeks and probably right up until dual overload is really diverse. There's a lot of rogue decks, there's a lot of meta decks. It's really fun to play in, but it's almost impossible to predict what Master Rule 5, at least for the first couple weeks, will actually look like. So I wanted to go with options that are good against a variety of matchups, so hopefully you guys can use these depending on how the metagame shapes up. Once we've had a couple regional weekends or a couple big events under Master Rule 5, I'll probably make another video about cards that end up being really good against what the actual meta is and not just what I predict the meta will be, but we'll have to wait a little while for that video to actually come out. Remember that if you guys want to purchase any of the cards that I mentioned in today's video, please use that link in the description below, and if you do that, please let me know on Twitter, like tag me in your post when the cards come in the mail so I can retweet it. I've done that a bunch of times. It's really fun to see which cards you guys are buying with my link. Anyway though, I'll see you guys later. Thank you so much for watching today's video. Goodbye.